Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on building a new era of the digital built environment. We've got three great hosts today who will be talking you through how different technologies can help drive real change and innovation through the RIBA plan of work. If you do have any questions you'd like to ask throughout the webinar, please insert them in the questions section of the webinar, and we'll be sure to ask them at the end to our hosts. So I'll now pass you over to our Principal Cloud Specialist, Danny Nicholson. Over to you, Danny.
Thank you, Lizzie. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for what I hope is going to be a very interesting fly through of what we're doing here at Claranet and what Microsoft are doing to support Claranet and their customers in the built environment AEC sector. Obviously, as Lizzie has introduced me, Danny Nicholson, I'm the actual AEC cloud lead here at Claranet, and I run the team of specialists that work with organizations with Azure in this space. I'm introducing Quam, Adewale here. He is at Microsoft's AEC industry lead, and we'll be taking you through some real key insights from Microsoft in the built space, the whole life of assets. And then finally, I'll be introducing you to Nikkita as we go through this webinar, who is a AEC cloud specialist here at Claranet as well, working with me, who work with organizations in this space. So to open us up, my first introduction and first real presentation is to go through this part now. So we're talking about the RIBA plan of work. I'll introduce you to the RIBA plan of work, what it is, why we've used it as a guiding star, if you like, of how we move through and work with the organizations and our customers in the AEC space. Then Quam will take you through the Microsoft solutions and how they draw a lens over the built environment. And then finally, quite controversially, Nikkita will be giving you an overview of the depth of the data center. And I won't go into any more details for that because you're going to want to stick around for that at the end. And then we'll have some Q&A. So the RIBA plan of work. Now, the RIBA plan of work is actually the Royal Institute of British Architects plan of work 2020. So that's the current version that is currently in draft and being used by organizations. And what is it? Well, interesting question. It was created in 1963 by the Royal Institute of British Architects, and it gives you a process, an 8-stage process that can take you from thinking about a building, the concept of a building, the concept of an asset, the concept of a refurb, the concept of an extension, the way of thinking about how a property developer potentially goes from considering building some space to the point where it's being run and being operated in that environment that it is built within, where people live, work, and play. So let me take you through the 8 stages that we've used at Claranet to really help us map our solutions and how Microsoft's Azure solutions can help you. So these are the 8 stages, and I'll take you through very briefly what they mean. So strategic definition, that's exactly what it is. It's defining whether or not the client, the person that wants to build the building, the customer that wants to build the building, can actually do it. What does it look like? Why are they going to do it? What's it going to bring to the area? What will it mean for their organization as a whole in terms of occupiers and tenants? And the real underlying outcomes and tasks that come out of these stages are typically things like a business case. It's the selection planning. How do they apply for planning permission to go forwards with that project? Then you move into the second stage, which is actually stage 1, because stage 0 is strategic definition. You don't necessarily move from there. If the strategic definition defines that the building is not going to be scalable, won't be feasible, isn't viable, it doesn't move to a project. Now, the project phases are actually 1 through to 6. And we start to go into a project mode when we move into preparation and briefing. And that's where design consultants, architects get brought into the stages, get brought into the project to start pulling together what is the next stage of a concept design. They'll start to do some very high level spatial coordination. They'll start to discuss whether or not there are sites that can actually host the space that they want to build. Is it horizontal footfall or is it vertical footfall? So I think the preparation and briefing is where you really start to pull out things such as the project brief, the employer requirements, the client requirements, the planning permissions, the building regulations that you will require, so that you can then go to either the local authority, the city, the council, to start applying to build that building in that space. And that's when it really starts to become an interesting project. Stage 2, concept design, is where architecture really builds in, and this is where RIBA really are strong in this space, obviously. This is where their members and their community are asked to come by the employer, by the client, to start to pull together what is that conceptual design, what does it look like? And I think some of the things that we found is that in the past, in a legacy construction and AEC space, very much paper driven, very much drawing driven. As we move now into more of a digital age, we're seeing more and more of the 3D augmentation. We're seeing a lot more of the digital world bringing these concept designs to life, and we'll talk about those in a moment. Moving into stage 3, which is spatial coordination and technical design, these are very important in that they now start to build out, does the concept design work? Does the space work with that conceptual design? Can it actually be designed, and can it technically work in the areas that you want to build that building? What does it look like in terms of vertical or horizontal footfall? How do they deal with health and safety? What are their strategic plans as they move forward into the project before they go into manufacturing and construction? And that's when you start to bring on your main contractor, your construction companies, the likes of Kia, the likes of Skanska, the likes of Balfour Beatty, that typically become what's known as the primary main contractor within an entire project. And they will then go off and build out and tender for all of the different subcontractors that will deliver those pieces of work that sit within the technical design, all built out from the spatial coordination and the concept design. And that's when it really gets going. And that's when the Lego bricks start to really pull together. And then finally, moving from construction, manufacturing and construction into transition, into handover, that is when the building is practically complete. It's handed back to the client, the original customer that came up with the strategic definition, to run that building. And normally they will appoint someone to run that building. And when we say operate, that's facilities management, that is operational management teams, that's technology services teams such as Claranet. And that's also when they start to partner with other ecosystem suppliers such as Microsoft to see how they can drive that building forward and operate that building in a more digital way. So what does that mean in terms of opportunities? So going on to the next slide, we have recently carried out a project internally at Claranet where we've worked through all of those 8 stages, and we came up with a concept, a scenario project, a hackathon, if you will, where we worked with dummy companies that would work all the way through the 8 stages, looking at opportunities and digital touch points where we can drive innovation, where we can drive cost efficiencies and savings, where we can really bring sustainability and a sustainability agenda to the forefront with things such as carbon emissions and energy usage. And we've worked from stage 0 all the way into in use. Now, the opportunities that we're showing on the screen here are not so much solutions or technologies, they are services and they are outcomes that we feel will help people drive through those 8 stages of the RIBA work plan to the point where they are really starting to get ahead of their peers. So FinOps, what is FinOps? That's financial operations. That's a critical part of any form of project all the way through the RIBA stages. How much will it cost? How much revenue will I drive from that occupier, from that tenant? How much revenue will I create for the community that it lives in? A lot of that financial operations is not just about projects, it's about what is that building going to bring to the area, bring to the workers that work in that space eventually, and to the local community and retailers that work and play in that area as well. And then green ops, everyone talks about it, everyone's talking about sustainability. It's top of the agenda right now for every CIO that anybody talks to. For us, we've got a Claranet service where we use standard tooling and tooling that we've built ourselves that will help you really measure carbon emissions from the start of the project to the finish of the project when it's in use, and then continue to use the likes of FinOps and GreenOps to drive sustainability as a strategic agenda throughout the use of that building. That whole life of the asset is very important. Technology partners and managed services, that's a bit selfish from a Claranet perspective because we think we're really great in this space. A lot of companies and a lot of landlords and a lot of property owners typically work with a facilities management team, and then they'll work with an operational management team that have a small technology arm. We think moving forwards, you need to start bringing the technology partners that you work with much higher in terms of the priorities that you're working through in that operating space and in that built environment, because it's extremely important. A lot of the security and health and safety when people talk about buildings is very much about the physical space. Well, for us, it's about the digital space. Where are your attack surfaces? Where is it easy to take control of buildings? Well, we're thinking CCTV. It's all on a network. It's all on the internet nowadays. You're thinking once you've got control of HVAC, you've got control of the energy, you've got control of the lifts, you've got control of the entire building from a single attack surface, which is the perimeter, the cyber perimeter of your building. And we believe now customers, organizations in the AEC space need to think about the technology partners they use to not only build the buildings and design the buildings and the technology services that run those buildings, but also to continue to run that technology service to ensure it's optimized, to ensure its integrity and it's robust enough to secure that space. And all of this is underpinned by data. I had a recent article on LinkedIn. We've released an article on LinkedIn quite recently where Claranet have said that we believe data is the single most unused, untapped source throughout a construction project. Not only are you spending millions and millions of pounds in building a building, but you're also creating billions and billions of data points when you are creating that space. You are creating that project. The data that you're creating to go from stage 0 to stage 7 there's billions of data points, and we think that is a space where we need to tap into and start to encourage organizations to use that data to help them build a better building for the sake of it and for the whole life of that asset. It doesn't just stop at project. The worst conversation anyone can have is just to talk about technology to someone and digital twins. What does it mean? I don't think anyone knows what it means. But for us, digital twins are an outcome that we believe is a way of ensuring that not only are you building the building and creating a building through design, allowing you to minimize error, allowing you to minimize and increase your clash detection, but also when you're in the run element of a space and you're operating a building, it doesn't stop. You continue to use that digital twin to optimize that space, to get the most out of an investment that is significant, and also making sure that that whole life of the asset is appropriate for how it's being used, because that will change through the lifespan of that asset. So that digital twin allows customers and organizations to really scenario certain elements of what can and can't be done to a building. How can we optimize the temperature? How can we optimize the air conditioning so that we're not cooling and heating at the same time? How can we use solar glare to heat parts of it? How can we not have customers and facilities management teams going out and fixing something after it's broken? How can we see that vibration in a HVAC unit? How can we use digital twins to ensure that we've got proactive maintenance and preventative maintenance that will in effect save costs, but also ensure the longevity of that space and that maintenance within that building? So I think that's just giving you a really brief overview of what we've done in Claranet recently and why we feel the AEC space is an absolute goldmine when it comes to technology and for digital transformation. And it's something that we're really passionate about as we go forwards. And we're working extremely close with Quam and his team and Microsoft to ensure that we're using the right solutions in the Azure stack to ensure that customers are driving forwards and ensuring that the construction and built environment becomes more and more digitally transformed as the years go through. So that's the end of my presentation. I think we've got a poll at the end of this where we'd like to just ask some questions. And I think everyone can vote on this. It's a yes or no on each one of them. So before this, did you know what the RIBA plan of work was? Okay. Do you think digital actually helps drive your projects forward? Are you using them in your space? Okay. And then finally, are you in cloud now, or are you looking at it? And I don't just mean from a corporate perspective. Are you in cloud now in your building, in your asset? Do you use cloud as a technology to help drive that building? Okay. Thanks very much. So moving on to our next presenter, Quam.
Morning all. Thanks, Danny. So good morning all, and thank you very much to Claranet for having me this morning, and also as well, thank you all for attending this morning. Danny mentioned that Quam Adewale, I'm the industry advisor for the built environment team here within Microsoft UK, built environment being our enterprise clients who sit across the entire infrastructure lifecycle. So civil engineering, architecture, construction, property developers, both commercial and residential, and also as well the operations and maintenance phase. Now, it wouldn't be a Microsoft presentation if I didn't start with our mission statement, but what I'm actually going to start with is the mission statement that we've coined for the built environment. Before I delve into that, the presentation, I'd like to sort of run through the agenda with you in terms of what I'll be covering today. Next slide, please. Izzy. So in terms of what I'll be covering in my element of the session is just to give you a bit of perspective as to how Microsoft is approaching and supporting yourselves. You know, Danny talked about the RIBA plan of work and how important it is for us as technologists and technology providers to ensure that we are aligning ourselves to your problem spaces, your scenarios and your use cases. And so we'll be talking around that today. We'll be talking around some of the feedback that we've been hearing from the likes of yourselves, both the executives in the boardroom, head of PMO, head of health and safety, all the way down to the senior IT decision makers and what challenges they're encountering and coming across. And then we'll be running through some examples as well as in terms of the existing transformation activity that we've got with some of our customers. And happy to take any questions when we get to the panel post Nikkita session as well. So, if we start with that mission statement slide, Microsoft's all-up corporate mission statement is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. But what we recognize is that there are specific nuances, specifically as it pertains, again, to those challenges that you encounter within architecture, engineering, and construction scenarios. And it really revolves around how do we support the built environment to, number one, sustainably transform. And when we talk around sustainability, we mean going beyond just environmental sustainability and responding to carbon emissions challenges, climate disclosure procedures. We mean around how do we drive the long-term viability of your business. You operate within businesses that are project-based businesses, time and materials-based contracts where margins are short. And so how do we ensure that we are driving and improving productivity to increase the operational margin and sustain your business and its longevity? In conjunction with that is also as well, how do we support you in enabling you with skills enablement and competency development? One of the biggest challenges, and I've got an element of that later on, is the challenges revolving around digital skills and the scarcity of digital skills, irrespective of what industry you actually operate in. And so we'll be talking around as well, how we can support alongside our partners like Claranet in order to enable those outcomes. If I draw your attention to those elements, the second element in blue there, those user-centric outcomes, this is really around how we ensure that we land those use cases and we focus on business outcome-led technology decisions. And then lastly there, when we talk about the whole life view of the asset, it's how we looking at whether it be a building, both commercial, residential, or public or critical national infrastructure, highways, bridges, and roads, we're ensuring that we are understanding how those assets will be used and how we factor in technology decisions in the design process through build, prefab, logistics, all the way through to how it's operated and maintained to deliver you the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, not only for your business, but also your own clients. If we pop to the next slide, I've just got one slider on how we view that whole life view of the infrastructure asset across the design all the way to operational phases. And really I'd just like to draw your attention to our principal approach to how we are actually developing our technology stack to enable this. And it hinges on three particular things: how we driven purpose-driven data models. And again, that kind of lends itself to point 2 around open and interoperable. You know, Danny talks about the transition to cloud, and I know Nikkita is going to touch on a touchy subject around the death of the data center. But what we're doing at Microsoft is we understand that often customers have a multi-cloud strategy. So how are we ensuring that our platform is interoperable so that you can secure your estate, whether you're handling applications that sit on premises in hybrid scenarios, or whether you're purchasing bespoke applications for different services across that infrastructure lifecycle that are SaaS, right? You know, how do you get a holistic view of those applications in the state and drive the integrations needed to really drive the outcomes for your clients? And then finally, that point around being trusted and secure. This is really where we believe that we're leading from a hyperscaler perspective, and it's all around ensuring that the data that you're handling on behalf of your clients know that their data is their data, it's secure, and we're not going to be using it for nefarious activities. And if you think around that entire life cycle, if you're moving from the design phase and your design tools, you know, Danny mentioned the BIM applications, your Autodesk, your Bentleys, you go into implementation, you might have various different ERP or asset management systems, whether that be from Oracle to SAP. And then you might have a number of, in the project phase, content management tools, you know, project tools, collaboration tools, even M365 as an example. And having to weave and integrate those data silos is a particular challenge. And so how do we support you in enabling a platform that can be a catch-all, that can define that common data model, that can drive that interoperability and can drive outcomes for your customers? Next slide, please. So what are customers saying about market trends? Next slide. We held an industry roundtable in the US. It was the first one that we'd done that was AEC specific. So these were some of the big brands in North America, and we're hoping to replicate that here in the UK over the coming months. And it was just interesting. I've taken a couple of quotes from that session. And the first one I'd like to bring to your attention is that everybody is becoming an information worker, right? Whether you are the guy or girl on site at a construction site, whether you're the project manager, you're the BIM manager, or you're a board level executive having a holistic overview or oversight of your project portfolio, everyone needs information to make better informed decisions. And that's being driven by the contractual stipulations that your end clients are driving. Again, whether that be in the commercial space or in the public infrastructure space, asset owners are demanding more from their delivery partners. They're demanding climate disclosure procedures. They're demanding their assets in the form of in a digital form, so that they can report on the performance of said building over the course of its time. They can measure degradation. They can understand materials usage. And so everyone is becoming an information worker. So how do you equip both your frontline and your knowledge workers with the right information at the right time, driving the right actions and insights that can improve your business processes? Next slide, please. Another quote I wanted to bring to your attention was this second quote around innovation in digital tools. What we're beginning to see is the prominence of discrete ISV suppliers, independent software vendors, who are coming in and providing disruptive capabilities, whether it's digital signage in a construction site, or whether it's using cognitive services to monitor video analytics metrics to provide improved health and safety on a site, or whether it's just simple new SaaS applications in the corporate enterprise level. We're seeing these new providers come into play. And so how do we support you, again, driving that interoperability, but also aggregating the insights that those services and applications gain? One thing that's particularly powerful about our AEC customers and your organizations is that you often have an abundance of information and an abundance of data, therefore, that serves that information. And so what we're increasingly seeing is organizations want to take advantage of that data, reuse and drive future insights to improve future projects, improve win decisions. So how do we support you, not only in understanding that data, but potentially building new business models that can drive differentiated revenue streams? And if we just pivot to the next slide, what I've tried to do is summarize some of those points in a couple of points I want to bring to your attention. So what's the discussion in the boardroom? We all know about the inflationary pressures that we're all challenged with, both from homeowners or occupiers of property, but also as well if we think around the increase in materials costs and also the challenges with global supply chain issues and the pressure that's putting on your business. Cost removal or driving liquidity is still number one, I would say, at the board level when it comes to AEC clients. Yes, there is a sustainability agenda, but if we look at what's pertinent within the next 3 months, it's around looking at our order book. Are we safe from a cash perspective, and also forecasting in terms of driving new work. Secondary to that, I talked around this regulatory push for greater sustainability, but health and safety and resilience are still at the heart of AEC clients' agenda. So if we think about things like the Building Safety Act coming into play post Grenfell around buildings at 18 stories and higher and the information management requirements, this is causing AEC customers or AEC organizations, should I say, to be forced really to better understand their information that they serve their clients and the data therefore that they serve their clients in order to mitigate and avoid penalties imposed by the government. Frameworks, contract management, supply chain, this is a never-ending issue. This is something that has been prominent within the industry for decades, but what's increasingly becoming clear is that large-scale asset owners like National Grid and the owners of critical national infrastructure are coming to us and coming to cloud vendors and like Microsoft and saying, how can we collaborate with you and your supply and our supply chain partners? Again, those of you may be familiar with the Enterprise Project 13 model, which talks around new frameworks and models around sort of more collaborative approaches to tendering processes. But in order to solve for some of these large scale sort of energy generation requirements that are happening, with everything that's going on in Russia, to solve for the sustainability agenda, to solve for the aging population and the increasing population, there's going to be more demand on infrastructure to be delivered in a shorter time. And with that comes a desire to digitize in order to make those improvements and to drive those outcomes quicker. Skills and competency, big one here. The Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors estimates that 360,000 jobs will be lost within the AEC sector within the next decade. And so that's why we have a number of digital skills programs that we're working with our customers to support them in moving through those challenges, but also in looking at and exploring and collaborating with industry boards to respond to that. And then finally, I talked about this accelerated pivot to digitization based upon all those previous elements that I described before. So again, what are then the IT decision makers saying? Well, we know we need to respond to these challenges, but we've got fragmented ecosystems tools, which lends itself to poor integration. We also have weak collaboration with our supply chain partners, sometimes going out and repeating orders to suppliers who may have missed a KPI, but also we have challenges with hiring. And so we need to look towards our strategic partners, our systems integrators community to bridge that gap. And finally, we recognize that there's a low digital maturity, but we're approaching how can you support us, Microsoft and Claranet and the likes, to help accelerate those outcomes. Next outcome. Next slide, sorry. So what's our approach and what are the examples of where we're delivering in this space? So again, it's really interesting seeing the changing role of IT, or digital, if you will, amongst our client base. And we're seeing this transition move from where IT departments are going from providing BAU, keeping the lights running for your organization, onboarding new employees, and waiting till assets are sweated and sort of upgrading servers and application estates, to actually IT now because of all those demands and drivers in the market, becoming a valued business partner. We're even seeing instances of IT departments seconding resources into project delivery because the project teams don't actually have the expertise, right? And so how do we support that, and both as Microsoft, but also as Claranet? And then on the far right there, we're increasingly seeing sort of now organizations begin to actually pivot to taking advantage of the data and insights that they gain from project delivery to actually build their own proprietary solutions, saving them having to go out to vendors or maybe even reselling those into market. And so really what we're doing at Microsoft is really these three particular things. If you just click, there we go. What we understand is that it's not just a technology decision, it's not just a technology process, but it's around how do we support your organizations with that cultural shift? How do we better educate ourselves, immerse ourselves in your challenges to help you shift along and support that transition? Leading with trust and transparency to say that, yeah, 10 years ago, we probably would have, turned up to your organization, asked you how many office licenses you'd use, and probably, flog you another 300 licenses. But your success is very much dependent on our success because of the consumption model. And so we need to be more transparent about that approach around what you're using with us today, but also understanding what that looks like moving forward. And again, finally, focusing on those user outcome use cases. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I'm just going to talk about some of our priority areas, and apologies for the slight blur in the formatting, but really we've got 5 areas that we're responding to and what we're building into product, both in Azure, but also our M365 ecosystem of applications. So things like Teams, the Office ecosystem, Windows and the likes, but then also our business applications platform, Power Platform, low code, no code capabilities. And again, apologies for the blur, but if we start with the empowered digital worker, what really examples of use cases and practices that we're leveraging cloud capabilities are for workflow automation, integration, delivery of PaaS services that drive quicker time to value, but also a lower total cost of ownership. If I pivot quickly then to project analytics, this one is key. Danny mentioned data. Increasingly, one of the common use cases we see is how well is my project performing? Can I forecast project cost performance? Can I predict when I'm going to break even? Another one, if I take you back to the middle around sustainable value chains, is inventory management, materials tracking and monitoring. How do I leverage IoT connected ecosystems to monitor materials volume, or has my supplier ordered on time, so on and so forth. And if we pivot to the right, the smart infrastructure, the real innovative capabilities that we're seeing pop up in market, it's around digital twin capability. So can I make decisions in a virtual environment that replicate outcomes from a business standpoint in the real world for optioneering, whether it be capital investment, for supply chain decisions, or even decisions around my assets. So if we click to the next slide, I just wanted to talk about 3 customer examples. Again, I picked these because they're publicly referenceable, and I'm conscious of time, so I'll quickly whiz through these. And usually what you see in these sorts of presentations is, oh, business outcome, benefit. But what I've actually done is just taken quotes from actually the customers around our engagement and the outcomes that we've delivered to them. So as you can see, Mark Pryor, a service leader for identity and access management at Arup, talks around how we engage to support their platform modernization and their transition of 4,000 users to Azure Active Directory, which is our identity and access management solution. And really what Mark's talking about here is not just the fact that the platform delivered business outcomes, but it was our engagement. It was access to private previews, to engineering resources, to test and actually feedback into our product in terms of its improvement. And actually, again, if you think around the scale of an organization like Arup with 95 offices operating in 35 countries, in order to take an organization of that scale through this transition, it's particularly important to ensure that, services will be upheld and there isn't service degradation to their project teams. If I quickly pivot to Atkins and the Dynamics Objects project, so Dynamics Objects is a business application that they use for optioneering of water assets in their project delivery from a consultancy perspective. And here we use some of our cloud services like Azure Spatial Anchors to monitor or to sort of help them with perception of geospatial assets in the application service. Again, this is an example of innovation that Atkins were delivering to end clients to drive business outcomes within a particular project. And then finally, if I draw your attention to Morgan Sindall and particularly the property services arm of Morgan Sindall, here they've actually created their own proprietary software solution called GoldenEye for smart facilities management use cases. And here again, this is an example of a traditional, well, Morgan Sindall do both engineering, construction, and maintenance and fit out as well. This is an example of a construction organization leveraging AI ML for particular use cases to understand asset utilization and make, again, decision making that facilities management resources can then go and make an improvements on. Again, I just wanted to splodge those couple of examples there to demonstrate different examples from modernization, app innovation, to actually developing a new platform that drives a new revenue stream, to look at just the scale and the nuance of what AEC clients are delivering from a cloud perspective. So I'll wrap up with what the future holds. I love this next slide. It's a little matrix, and again, feel free to snip the slides. But what we hear is almost a SWOT analysis of the trends that we're increasingly seeing. If you go back 15 years in the engineering world, there was the adoption of BIM, but what we're now seeing is that civil engineering, the civil engineering domain and data science and data engineering practices are collapsing because of cloud technology's possibilities. And so we're actually seeing BIM managers, civil engineers incorporate simulation and modeling capabilities in their BIM model to take into consideration factors such as embodied and operational carbon in their sort of models or digital twins. What we're also seeing is the prominence of autonomous systems. So these are deploying sort of machine learning applications to assets to actually monitor their utilization and actually almost self-teach. Again, these are real innovative items, but we're also seeing organizations to begin to adopt wide-scale enterprise analytics, right? So business intelligence reporting, how my projects perform. Again, as I mentioned previously, how can I forecast projects improvement? And so these are some of the outcomes and trends that we see as opportunities, but also as well, things that are in the here and now today for AEC organizations. So I'll wrap up there because I know I've taken up a whole chunk of time, but thank you very much for your time, and happy to answer any questions in the Q&A.
Thanks, Quam, that's excellent. One thing before we go on to the next one, it's really interesting to see companies that you wouldn't typically see, such as Morgan Sindall and the likes of Atkins, becoming technology companies. I think that's something that everybody talks about and says, every budget is a technology budget, every project is a technology project. However, you've now got organizations that are creating their own tech and using it with customers, and I think that's a massive step change in what I've seen over the last 10, 15 years. So it's really interesting to see that. Okay, so over to Nikkita, the death of the data center.
Hi everyone. So as previously said, I'm Nikkita. I'm an AEC cloud specialist here at Claranet. Been with the company for just over 3 years now after joining as part of the graduate scheme. And in that time, I've worked with a range of enterprise customers, new and existing, all at various stages of their cloud journeys. So hopefully I've kept this short and sweet for you all today. And I'll be covering what we're referring to as the death of the data center, and particularly Microsoft VMware solution, AVS, what is it, how it works, and most importantly, the outcomes and the impact it can have on your business. And hopefully there'll be some common themes that you'll see as well that will run through from Danny and Quam into this as well. So next slide, please. So the whole host of reasons of why customers we're speaking to are looking to move away from the traditional on-premise hosting, with almost all having at least some workloads in hyperscaler clouds now. Many have already started or progressing further on the cloud journey, leveraging those cloud-native technologies. So just some of the main reasons that we hear from customers when they're looking to adopt these cloud technologies are cost efficiencies. They're moving away from those high capex spends, looking to when they're needed to refresh physical kit or set up, as previously mentioned, working on low margins and cash poor businesses. This is really important in the AEC sector, and right sizing, making sure you're paying for what you use. And it's also worth mentioning here that there's a range of funding options available, which we're happy to discuss on an individual basis should you wish to know more after today. So then there's also scalability. Businesses needs ever-changing, organizations having to adapt quickly and keep up. Long hardware lead times have big business impacts, and not being able to respond quickly to changing demands, causing project delays and knock-on effects. Then the big one that I think has been spoken about quite a bit today is AEC businesses are also looking to start leveraging those cloud-native technologies, data analytics, IoT, and AI, making the difference. There's also the need to access applications from anywhere to increase those efficiencies of collaboration and reduce both the waste of time and resources. And then as well, the complexity, and I mean complexity in terms of infrastructure schools at school. So this was the case for Kia. As a result of a number of acquisitions, their infrastructure had spread across 10 different data centers, making it complex to manage, difficult to run, and increasing their carbon footprint. So the data center footprint reduction, consolidation, retirement, all common themes that we're hearing from customers. So Kia came to us through Microsoft in 2021. They were looking to move at scale to public cloud with a potential 1,400 VMs, 262 applications, and 400 terabytes of data. So this was all that needed to be migrated with minimal downtime and zero business disruption. And this was the first migration of this scale to AVS that we did. And as you can see on the screen, we achieved a migration of 800 VMs in less than 4 months with only 3 rollbacks. So how did we do it? On to the next slide, please. So what is AVS? AVS is essentially your current VMware environment in Azure, giving you symmetry of your on-premise experience in the cloud. It's an Azure service built with VMware that delivers a vSphere-based single-tenant private cloud. This allows you to scale, it allows automation, fast provisioning of your VMware workloads and global Azure infrastructure. You can keep using your existing VMware investment, skills and tools, including vSphere, vSAN, vCenter, whilst being able to integrate your environment with Azure services, allowing you to modernize workloads with Azure management, security and services. So as already mentioned today, that skill shortage, this eliminates that. You keep your current skill sets and utilize the public cloud. Now, Microsoft's designed approach is to initiate the migrations from source data center and push VMs out onto a replicated data center into the AVS platform. This can be achieved with VMware's HCX application mobility platform, creates a copy, a replica that can be switched on when the migration is ready to go live. Now, for Kia, permissions and controls of their existing private cloud prevented this. That meant that the teams at Kia and Claranet had to get a little bit creative and reverse engineer that migration, pulling assets out of the private cloud into AVS. So now we've covered at a high level what it is. I think it makes sense to talk about the business impact and the results that you can achieve from AVS migration. There we go. AVS can be referred to as a stepping stone in your Azure journey, allowing you to transform at your own pace. So whilst leveraging your existing investment and skills and tool sets, you can start to make use of Azure services such as Sentinel, blob storage, Azure Monitor. I mean, the list literally goes on and on. There's over 500 services, so I won't sit here and list them all for you. And you can eliminate some of the blockers that prevent or slow down companies moving to public cloud. So as mentioned before, that skill shortage, the complexities of having to refactor applications. This is a lift and shift at fast pace. And finally, though it's not an extensive list, you can get out of the hardware game and eliminate the need for the large capex spend, become more agile as you can provision and scale at pace, free up your staff, focus on strategic direct objectives, if I can say my words, rather than the day-to-day running of that on-premise equipment and managing kit. And it's just worth mentioning as well that if you're in a depreciation cycle, we can discuss buyback options and things as well with you. So there's a lot of different options and things to be discussed. And that brings me on to my next slide.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to click onto the poll slide. I don't think we had the previous slide before that on there, but yeah, we want to start these polls now. Start the first one off. Okay, great. So that first one's people have answered there. So thank you. Click on to the second one, which is, have you looked into AVS? And then the last poll I will just ask now. Okay, great. I'll just close that last slide there. I don't know if there's a Q&A session now. Thank you all for the presentation there, and thank you all so much for joining us for the Q&A session now. If we've got a few questions in, let's get started on that if that's okay with yourselves. So one of the first questions we've had in from someone is, if I were to proceed with AVS, could I continue my existing tooling by SCCM or SCOM and so on? So that's the first question we've got. I'm not sure who would like to answer that, maybe Nikkita or?
Yeah, Nikkita, you crack on with that one.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question
I'll repeat
again?
the question, sorry. So if I were to proceed with AVS, could I continue to use my existing tooling like SCCM or SCOM and so on?
Yes. In short.
Yeah, I think it's key to point out here that Microsoft's AVS solution is literally a virtual machine, a virtual VMware solution sat on Microsoft's kit in Microsoft's data center, and that's what gives you the flexibility and the pace of migration to allow you to go from what you've got in your own data center with your existing tool sets, pick them up, and it's almost, if there's technologists on the call, it's almost like doing a storage vMotion from your array and your x86 equipment to theirs. Once you're there, nothing changes. IP addresses can stay the same. Everything can stay the same. But as we've kind of pointed out, AVS is getting you out of the hardware game, getting you out of the data center, and then you've got a nice stepping stone to move into more cloud native solutions and truly transform that service and those application services and business services in the Azure environment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Danny. Another question we've had is, so RA is actually storage vMotion to MS computers. So can you guarantee zero downtime for these?
I'll pick that one up. So there's a lot of dependency on that. So typically the only challenge you're going to have is network latency. What is the network link that you're using to stretch across from your data center into Microsoft's data center? And you know, the typical latency, how many milliseconds before you get something dropped? But just give you an example of what we did with Kia, we actually moved 800 virtual machines from 2 hosted data centers, one in the UK, one in Germany. We moved every single virtual machine into Microsoft's AVS solution, and we didn't lose a single packet. And people were still working on some of these applications whilst they were in transit. And the only 3 rollbacks we had were 3 test and development machines that didn't have a specific agent that it required just to restart it when we got to the other side. So can we guarantee it? 99.9% yes. Is that always the case? No, because it is very much dependent on the network. But and I'm sure Nikkita will talk about it, and we'll talk about it at the end here, but we've got an Azure marketplace solution that will allow you to run a proof of concept with a set amount of AVS nodes, all working in best practice, where we can help design that infrastructure stretch that will allow us to test that before we even think about moving across anything from your production environment into Microsoft's AVS. So we have ways of looking at that, and we can almost guarantee zero downtime once we understand your networks and what we need to do to ensure that that stretch works. But for Kia, we said we would have zero downtime, and we did. So yeah, we can. It's something.
Great, thank you for that, Danny. Just let me have a look here. I think we've got another question that's come through asking about the RIBA plan of work. So each stage is almost like a build-up of the stage before. So can I reuse my environments if I own them and the client doesn't? For instance, Pandora?
question. Yes, you can. If you are say you're an architect firm, TP Bennett, for instance, and you've invested into Panzura cloud file services, or you've got Nasuni or whatever it might be in terms of your file services solution that's in the cloud, can you reuse and keep using for different clients? Yes, you can. Can you use it for a project and then reuse it? There would be conversations around data, clearly. You can pretty much only keep your own data, as it were. You'd have to have specific permissions to keep some of this unstructured data. However, if you build a Panzura environment and it's in the cloud on the Azure platform and it's yours, you can use it for any project you want to. And you can also create what are known as joint venture projects within that Panzura solution built on Azure that allows you to have different projects with different access, with different permissions to different companies across all of your projects, which allows you to reuse a lot of your technology, which again, from a sustainability perspective, really does help move that the dial really in there. So yeah, we have seen that quite a lot.
Great, thanks for that, Danny. Another question we have had in, quite a few here, so thank you so much for asking your questions. What happens with server and SQL 2008? Do I get a free ESU on AVS at all?
I'm gonna pass that to Quam.
Depending upon your licensing profile, you are eligible for what we call Azure Hybrid Use Benefits. So, for example, if you have an on-premise instance that is out of support, your ESU updates, if those servers are transitioned to cloud VMs, are extended into the cloud, and it's termed Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. So again, you don't have to pay for those extended support updates that are pretty costly on premises.
Great, thank you for that, Quam. And then the final question we've had in here is, do Claranet manage data centers in buildings? One of you there.
We do, because we manage quite a few data centers. We manage our own data centers. We manage co-location sites that have physical equipment and application services on it. We don't currently manage a Azure environment that is running a building, which is this an aspiration of ours, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, we manage any type of data center, and we can manage any type of technology environment. That's what we do. We haven't been asked to yet in terms of running it for a building, but we certainly would be up for that challenge. So yeah, in answer to your question, yes, we manage lots of data centers and lots of clouds, including Azure, including our own. Do we do it in the built environment? We do it for a lot of organizations that work in the built environment, but we don't do it in buildings just yet. But watch this space.
Great, thanks for that, Danny. So yeah, that's all the questions we've had today. I would just like to thank everybody who's joined our webinar. Here are the contact details below, so if you want to get in touch, please contact Danny or our sales team with the phone number there. We will be running a series of these webinars throughout the upcoming months, so yeah, just please keep on our social also, and we'll start promoting them very soon. So I'd just like to say thank you to Nikkita, Danny and Quam again for this amazing webinar, and we really hope that everyone who's attended has enjoyed it. So thank you all, and hopefully see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Quam. Thank you, guys.
Thanks all. Appreciate your time.
Bye.